a hoodie, an upscale showroom, and a revelation that leaves everyone speechless. What unfolds when a car dealership manager makes the mistake of underestimating the man who secretly holds all the power? Ethan cruised down the serene streets of Beverly Hills, California, before rolling into the lot of Lux Autos, a high-end dealership he'd secretly acquired. The luxurious cars gleamed under the sun, their polished surfaces catching the light and casting reflections against the stunning LA skyline. He parked his humble hatchback far from the usual prime customer spots, at the back of the lot. Stepping out, he paused for a moment, taking in the sight of the dealership, a sleek two-story building with glass windows stretching from floor to ceiling, offering a glimpse of the finest European sports cars inside. Clad in a simple black hoodie, faded jeans, and well-worn sneakers, Ethan looked more like a college student than a millionaire. His choice of attire was intentional. He wanted to gauge the true vibe of the place, to see how it ran when no one knew the man behind the curtains was watching. As he walked through the front entrance, he could hear faint chatter from the employees at the front desk, the sound of casual conversation mixed with the soft hum of the air conditioning, offering a welcome contrast to the sweltering heat outside. Inside, the showroom was cool and inviting. The scent of leather and freshly waxed cars lingered in the air as the latest models glistened under the showroom lights. The chatter immediately ceased as Ethan entered, his presence unnoticed at first. But as he made his way deeper into the showroom, he caught a few sideways glances from the staff, glances that were quick, curious, and perhaps a little dismissive. They couldn't help but notice his laid-back appearance, especially compared to the tailored suits they were used to seeing from customers. Ethan felt the shift in atmosphere. There was a distinct change in the air, a moment of silent judgment, but he wasn't fazed. He wasn't there to judge anyone. He was there to observe. From across the showroom she appeared. Megan. Megan was in her early 40s, with sharp cheekbones and an even sharper attitude. Her business suit was expertly tailored, fitting her frame with precision, and her heels clicked authoritatively on the marble floor. The clipboard tucked under her arm only added to her no-nonsense persona. As she walked towards Ethan, there was a clear air of purpose about her. Her face was initially neutral, but her smile felt a little too rehearsed, as if she were waiting for a specific response. "Can I assist you?" Megan asked, her tone crisp and controlled, the words practically cutting through the air. Ethan's response was easygoing. "Just here to browse," he said, casually gesturing toward the cars in the showroom. Megan's sharp eyes scanned him from head to toe, lingering on his hoodie and sneakers for a beat too long. A flicker of disbelief passed through her expression before she quickly masked it with professional politeness. "Are you in the market for a vehicle?" she asked, her voice carrying a thinly veiled skepticism. Ethan nodded, unfazed. "Something like that." Megan's lips pressed together tightly, her smile becoming even more rigid. "Well, we cater to a very particular kind of client here. Many of our cars require pre-qualification. Perhaps I could suggest something more suitable." Before she could continue, another employee's voice rang out from across the showroom. "Megan, the shipment's here." Megan's attention briefly shifted toward the delivery truck outside. She hesitated for a moment, before her eyes snapped back to Ethan, as if reminding herself not to let her guard down completely. Ethan raised an eyebrow, his expression amused but still calm. "Are you assuming I'm not qualified?" The question hit her like a sudden chill, and for a second, the professional veneer faltered. But just as quickly, Megan straightened, regaining her composure. Her posture became rigid, her expression tightening as she prepared to respond. "I'm just trying to save you some time," Megan replied, her smile strained and controlled. "These cars start at well over 6 figures. Maybe I could suggest something more within your range." Ethan didn't flinch. Externally he remained calm, but internally, he made a note of her choice of words. The assumption that he couldn't afford these vehicles stung just enough to leave a mark, though his exterior was unfazed. The silence between them stretched for a moment, the tension palpable as Megan stood, waiting for him to respond. Ethan casually surveyed the showroom, his gaze shifting to one of the high-end models on display, a sleek black sports car with sharp edges and an intimidating stance. His fingers grazed the glossy surface, and he turned back toward Megan. "Nice car," he commented, his tone light. Her eyebrows knitted together for a fraction of a second, but she quickly masked it with another polite smile. "It is. When you're ready to make a serious inquiry, we can set up an appointment, but for now please refrain from touching the vehicles." Ethan paused, considering her words for a moment before stepping away from the car. He tucked his hands into his pockets and gave her a slight nod, signaling that he was ready to hear her out. "All right then, what would you recommend for someone like me?" he asked, his voice still casual, but carrying an underlying edge. Megan blinked, thrown off by the directness of his question. She opened her mouth to reply, but Ethan didn't wait. He added, "If you think you know what I need, I'm all ears." For just a split second, Megan's professional mask slipped, and the impatience she had been holding back became visible. She quickly composed herself, but the cracks in her demeanor were noticeable to anyone paying attention. "Maybe something a little more budget-friendly," Megan suggested, her smile tight. "I can give you directions to a dealership that specializes in pre-owned vehicles." Ethan's smile was faint, but it didn't reach his eyes. He'd heard enough. "That's quite the assumption," he said, his voice calm but carrying an edge. The words lingered in the air for a brief moment, and for a split second, Megan faltered. Her composure wavered, but she quickly straightened herself, squaring her shoulders as if preparing for battle. "I'll be back with some options," she said briskly, turning on her heel and walking away. Ethan stood still, his gaze fixed on her retreating figure. His expression remained unreadable, though the wheels in his mind were already turning. He turned back to the sleek black sports car, his reflection staring back at him in its flawless surface. This was going to be an interesting day. He stood in the center of the showroom, hands in his pockets, casually surveying the lineup of cars. He wasn't quick to judge, but Megan's dismissive tone was hard to ignore. He had grown used to this kind of treatment over the years, the judgmental stares, the subtle assumptions, the whispered conversations just behind his back. Around him, the staff had resumed their chatter, though a few of them couldn't help but glance his way now and then. Ethan wasn't new to this silent scrutiny. It was something he'd faced often. Megan returned moments later, her clipboard clutched in her hands like a shield. Her quick stride and the tightness of her smile made it clear that her patience was running thin. "All right," she said, stopping just a few feet from him. "I've compiled a few options that might be more suitable for your situation." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "My situation?" "Yes," Megan replied, her tone growing more clipped with each word. She handed him a sheet of paper filled with listings for pre-owned cars, each one priced far below the dealership's usual high-end inventory. As Ethan took the printout, he couldn't help but notice the way she almost seemed to be daring him to respond. "These are more accessible models," Megan said, her voice stiff, but trying to sound helpful. "Reliable, economical, and, well, practical." Ethan took the list from her without a word, his eyes scanning the paper. A used sedan, an older SUV, a compact hybrid. His lips curled into a faint smile, but he quickly suppressed it, folding the paper neatly and slipping it into his pocket. "Appreciate the effort," he said, his tone cool and even. Megan seemed momentarily taken aback by his calm demeanor, but she quickly regained her composure, hands firmly placed on her hips. "Listen," she began, lowering her voice slightly, as if sharing a secret. "I'm just trying to be realistic with you. Looks Autos isn't for everyone. I don't want to waste your time." Ethan met her gaze without blinking, his expression neutral but unwavering. "And what exactly makes you think I'm not your target customer?" he asked, his voice carrying an undertone of curiosity. Megan hesitated, just for a moment, before responding. "I've been in this business a long time," she said, her voice tinged with authority. "I can tell when someone's out of their depth." "Out of their depth," Ethan repeated, his tone light but with an edge. "Interesting." There was a flicker of doubt in Megan's eyes, but she pressed forward, trying to stay composed. "I'm just being honest," she continued. "It's better to be upfront than to have someone leave disappointed." Ethan chuckled softly, shaking his head slightly. "Honest, huh? I like honesty. How about this? Let me speak to the owner. Think we can make that happen?" Megan's eyebrows shot up, and for the first time, she seemed genuinely caught off guard. "The owner?" she echoed, her voice laced with disbelief. "That's right," Ethan replied, his tone casual, almost conversational. "I'd like to have a word with them." Megan's lips twitched in what was clearly a forced smile. "Well, that's not possible today. The owner doesn't exactly make casual visits. They're a very busy person." "I'm sure they are," Ethan said, nodding slightly. "But maybe you could give them a call. Let them know I'm here. I think they'd want to meet me." Megan's smile tightened, her patience beginning to fray at the edges. "Look, sir," she said, her voice clipped, "I'm trying to be as polite as possible. but this is getting ridiculous. I've got other customers to attend to. If you're serious about purchasing a car, we can schedule a meeting with one of our sales consultants. Otherwise what? Ethan asked, his tone still calm, but now there was a sharpness to it that wasn't there before. Megan's eyes narrowed, her frustration finally breaking through. Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. The words hung heavily in the air, thick with an unspoken challenge. Ethan stood perfectly still, his gaze fixed on her for a long moment. The whole showroom seemed too quiet, as if it were waiting for the next move. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. All right, he said, tapping through his contacts. I'll make the call myself. Megan blinked, her brow furrowing. What are you doing? Just calling the owner, Ethan replied nonchalantly, raising the phone to his ear. Shouldn't take long. Megan's confidence wavered, replaced by confusion as she watched him dial. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words seemed to get stuck. The employees around them had stopped what they were doing, their eyes glued to the escalating scene. Ethan held up a finger, signaling for her to wait a moment, then turned slightly away, speaking casually into the phone. Yeah, it's me. I'm at the dealership. Everything's fine, just a small misunderstanding. Could you let them know I'm here? Ethan ended the call, and slipped the phone back into his pocket, his eyes returning to Megan. They'll be here shortly, he said with a calm, almost casual air. Megan stared at him, her mouth slightly ajar. Who did you just call? Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he scanned the showroom, his gaze lingering on the staff who were now watching the situation unfold with wide eyes. Guess we'll find out, he replied, a playful tone creeping into his voice. The tension in the room thickened, like a fog that refused to lift. It pressed down on everyone present, making the space feel smaller and more suffocating with each passing second. Megan shifted uncomfortably, her professional facade starting to crack. Minutes ticked by, but the room seemed to freeze, the silence growing heavier. Megan fidgeted with her clipboard, her movements rigid and deliberate, betraying her mounting anxiety. Ethan, on the other hand, remained cool, standing beside a high-end SUV, with his hands casually in his pockets. His relaxed demeanor only seemed to heighten the palpable tension. The few remaining employees in the showroom exchanged whispers, stealing quick glances at the pair. It was clear everyone was waiting for something, or more accurately, for someone. Then, the main doors of the showroom swung open, the chime of the bell signaling the arrival of a newcomer. A sharply dressed man in a navy suit stepped inside, his polished shoes clicking crisply against the marble floor. His serious expression softened as he spotted Ethan, and his eyes locked onto him immediately. Mr. Carter, the man said, a broad smile spreading across his face as he extended his hand. So good to see you. Ethan returned the handshake with a firm grip, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Thanks for coming, Alex. Appreciate it. The entire room seemed to stiffen, the air growing colder. Megan's clipboard almost slipped from her hands as her eyes darted between Ethan and Alex, the dealership's regional director. Her confusion quickly turned into alarm, a flush creeping up her neck. Wait, Mr. Carter. She repeated, her voice now tinged with uncertainty. Alex turned to her, his warm demeanor shifting instantly into something colder, more professional, almost curt. Megan, I see you've already met Mr. Carter. Megan blinked, her mouth opening and closing as if searching for an explanation. I didn't realize. You didn't realize he's the new owner of this dealership. Alex finished, his tone sharp, cutting through the tension like a knife. He glanced at Ethan, his expression shifting to one of mild apology. I trust this wasn't your ideal welcome. Ethan raised a hand, cutting him off. It's all right, Alex. I think Megan and I just got off on the wrong foot. His voice was calm, but there was a weight to it that made everyone in the room pause, as if the gravity of his words had settled on them all. Megan's face drained of color, and she took a step back, clutching her clipboard to her chest like it was her only anchor to reality. I'm so sorry, she stammered, her voice barely audible. I didn't know. You didn't know what? Ethan asked, his tone gentle but with a firmness that couldn't be ignored. That I could own a place like this. That someone like me might actually belong here. Megan's eyes widened, her breath catching as she looked at him, utterly lost for words. For a moment, it was as if the world had stopped around her. I didn't mean. Ethan held up a hand, cutting Megan off. It's fine, Megan, really. He took a step closer, his voice dropping just low enough to make everyone lean in. But let me ask you something. If I hadn't been the owner, would you have treated me any differently? Would you have given me the same respect you'd give someone who walked in here wearing a suit and tie? Megan opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. The silence hung heavy in the room, thick with the weight of her unspoken thoughts. Ethan nodded slowly, as though her silence had spoken volumes. He turned to Alex, his voice shifting into a tone of quiet authority. Let's gather everyone in the conference room. I think it's time we had a little chat about how things are run around here. The employees shuffled into the sleek conference room, the air growing thick with tension. The room, with its glass walls and modern furnishings, was designed to impress, but today, it felt more like a pressure cooker about to explode. Megan sat near the back, her usual confident posture replaced with a tense, nervous stillness that was hard to miss. She clasped her hands together tightly, glancing at the others, her mind racing. Ethan stood at the head of the table, effortlessly commanding the attention of everyone in the room with his calm, collected presence. He exuded an authority that no one could ignore. Alex remained near the door, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He watched the employees take their seats, his gaze flicking between them, gauging their reactions. The quiet murmur of whispers died down as Ethan cleared his throat. Thank you all for joining me on short notice, Ethan began, his voice measured but firm. For those of you who don't know, my name is Ethan Carter, and as of last month, I'm the new owner of Lux Autos. There were murmurs of surprise from a few employees, their reactions ranging from curiosity to clear embarrassment. Megan sank lower in her chair, avoiding eye contact as the weight of the situation settled in. I came here today dressed casually for a reason, Ethan continued, his voice steady, almost measured. I wanted to see how this dealership operates when no one knows who I am. I wanted to experience what a potential customer might feel walking through these doors. He let his words linger in the room, allowing them to settle before continuing. What I experienced today was disappointing. I was judged not for what I could bring to the table, but for how I looked. And I'm not here to single anyone out, but we need to talk about what that says about the culture of this dealership. Megan shifted in her seat, her face flushed, clearly uncomfortable. Ethan's eyes flicked briefly to her before moving back to the group, addressing them all with the same calm authority. This isn't just about me, he said. It's about every person who walks through those doors. Every customer who doesn't fit into someone's preconceived notion of what a luxury car buyer looks like. A young sales associate, barely out of his 20s, hesitantly raised his hand. His voice wavered as he spoke, a little unsure but wanting to address the issue. Mr. Carter, he began, his words tentative, I think most of us try to treat customers fairly, but sometimes it's hard not to make assumptions. Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful, acknowledging the young man's honesty. I get that, he said, his voice softer now but still firm. We all have biases, whether we want to admit it or not. But here's the thing, it's not enough to just try to be fair. We have to actively challenge those biases. We have to create an environment where everyone feels respected, regardless of their appearance, background, or anything else. Ethan paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in before continuing. This dealership has built a reputation for excellence. But excellence isn't just about the cars we sell, it's about the experience we provide. And from now on, that experience is going to be built on respect, inclusivity, and fairness. A ripple of agreement passed through the room, though a few faces remained uncertain, unsure of how this would affect their day-to-day work. Ethan's gaze settled on Megan, who sat frozen, her hands tightly clasped in her lap as though bracing herself for what was to come. Megan, he said gently, but there was an unmistakable firmness in his tone. I want to give you the opportunity to speak. Is there anything you'd like to say? All eyes turned to her. Megan hesitated, her lips parting and closing as she wrestled with the words. Finally, her voice came out barely above a whisper. I made a mistake, she admitted, her cheeks flushed, her hands trembling slightly. I misjudged you, and for that, I'm truly sorry. Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable, but there was a quiet acknowledgement in his eyes. Thank you for saying that, he said, his tone steady and calm. I hope this experience will serve as a reminder for all of us, not just you. Because change starts with accountability. He turned back to the group, his gaze sweeping across the room. Moving forward, we'll be implementing new training programs to ensure this dealership represents the values I believe in. Every customer deserves to be treated with dignity. No exceptions. If anyone has an issue with that, now's the time to speak up. The room fell into an unsettling silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning. No one spoke, but the heaviness of Ethan's words seemed to press down on everyone present, filling the room with an unspoken weight. Ethan let the silence stretch for a moment longer, allowing the significance of the moment to settle in. "Good," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "I'm glad to see we're all on the same page. Change isn't always easy, but it's necessary, and this dealership is going to lead by example." He took a step away from the table, his hands resting lightly on its edge as he leaned forward slightly. His presence seemed to command the room now, a sense of finality in the way he held himself. "Let me make something clear. I didn't come here today to humiliate anyone," Ethan said, his voice steady but firm. "I came to understand what kind of culture I've inherited, and how we can make it better." His eyes moved to Megan, who was still seated quietly near the back, her body language small and reserved. "Megan," Ethan said, his tone softening just enough to let her know he wasn't attacking her. "You're an experienced manager, and I'm sure you've worked hard to get where you are. But today was a wake-up call for you and for all of us." Megan's gaze lifted, meeting his eyes for the first time since the confrontation began. She opened her mouth to speak, her voice shaky, but sincere. "I understand," she said, the words tinged with regret. "I was wrong, and I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." Ethan nodded once, a gesture of both acknowledgement and finality. "I believe in second chances," he replied simply, his tone resolute. "But accountability comes first. I'll be meeting with you, one-on-one, to discuss next steps. For now, let's focus on moving forward." He straightened, his attention shifting back to the rest of the team, his voice taking on a new strength. "We're not just selling cars here. We're building trust, creating relationships, and representing a standard of excellence. If you're on board with that, I'm here to support you every step of the way." This time, the murmur of agreement was louder, more genuine. The staff seemed to visibly relax, the palpable tension beginning to fade. Even Alex, who had remained silent and observant by the door, nodded in approval. Ethan smiled faintly, the kind of smile that reflected both a sense of relief and a deep determination. "All right then," he said, his voice carrying a quiet authority. "Let's get back to work. And remember, how we treat people matters more than anything we sell." As the employees began to file out of the room, Ethan noticed Megan lingering by the door. She approached him hesitantly, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. "Mr. Carter," she began, her voice low, I want to thank you for giving me a chance to do better. I won't let you down." Ethan studied her for a moment, his face a mask of calm. After a brief pause, he spoke, his voice unwavering. "I hope you mean that, Megan. Words only go so far, actions are what truly matter. But I believe people can change, if they're willing to put in the effort." She gave a small nod, her eyes full of sincerity, a quiet resolve shining through. Ethan watched her leave the room, his gaze then turning back to Alex, who had been standing by the door, an expression of quiet admiration and understanding on his face. "We'll schedule a meeting with the team next week," Ethan said, his tone steady yet considerate. "I want to make sure everyone knows what's expected from here on out." Alex grinned, his respect for Ethan clear in his smile. "You got it, boss." As Ethan made his way back into the showroom, the gentle hum of the space seemed to fill the air, a calm that mirrored the shift in his thoughts. His eyes swept over the shining cars, their sleek surfaces reflecting the warm glow of the afternoon light. There was still so much to be done, but for the first time that day, he felt a spark of hope. This wasn't just about running a business anymore. It was about creating something more, something beyond the cars they sold. A place where people were valued for their character, not their appearance. And Ethan knew, without a doubt, that he was ready to lead that change. And Ethan was ready to lead the way.